Yes.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Environmental Quality Commission's December 16th meeting. This is a teleconference meeting with EQC members, city staff, and members of the public participating remotely to ensure proper social distancing in this federal, state, and local emergency. I'd like to start by introducing the staff and EQC members present. Commissioners Gaylord, Cabot, myself, Deb Martin, and let's see, Commissioner Payne, and staff present include Rebecca Lucky. I don't think there's anyone else. Is that correct? I can't see both at the same time. Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, and me, Leah Elkins.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Elkins, and Commissioner Elkins, who's relatively new, and I will never forget again. All right. Rebecca, would you please provide instructions to the EQC and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
Thank you, Vice Chair London, and welcome members of the public. This is the December meeting of the Environmental Quality Commission. And just want to welcome everyone. Let me make sure I turn on my camera, look at my controls here. At this time, we ask if there are, if the members of the EQC can please keep on their video and remain on screen during the duration of the meeting. Staff will be able to engage webcams and microphones to make presentations and to respond to questions of the commission. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to speak on an item, after the chair calls for public comment, I'll have the ability to unmute your microphone and allow you to speak so that you can address the commission with your comments or feedback or questions. This concludes the instructions on how to participate in the meeting, and I return the meeting back to you, Vice Chair London. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lucky. Okay, under public comment, the public may address the EQC on any subject matter not listed on the agenda. And each speaker may address the EQC once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. When you do so, we ask that you please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live if you desire. The EQC cannot act on items that are not listed on the agenda, and therefore the EQC cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. Ms. Lucky, do we have any public comment on the consent calendar?
Thank you, Commissioner London. I do not see any hands raised at this time to make public comment.
Okay, great. Then I will move on to regular business, if that is appropriate. So under regular business, the EQC considers providing advice to City Council on sustainability policy matters or administrative actions that require City Council decision. So our first action item is to approve the November minutes. I wonder if there are any clarifying, sorry, go ahead.
Pardon, Chair London, there are no minutes on the agenda for this meeting. It's going to be carried over to January.
Ah, perfect. Okay then. I will then move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is, visibility is challenging. Okay, moving on to regular business. So the action item is to review and discuss the draft 2021-2022 Commission Work Plan prepared by a subcommittee of the EQC.
I think I might be up to present, Leah, unless you or Tom want to. We didn't really discuss. I'm getting a no from Leah and no from Tom. Okay. Alrighty. So Leah, Tom, and I met shortly after our last meeting, and we took the last work plan, and we basically just went through it and made some changes to try to bring it current with what we feel like the Commission is already actually currently working on. And we grouped and updated it a little bit for some of the items. So I do not have a formal presentation, but I'm happy to bring up sections of the work plan so we can review it. And we thought that this would be, what we discussed last time was that this would be a working meeting. So an opportunity to really see what we can do. If we can plow through this tonight and come to some sort of consensus, then we'll have a clear plan. Council, maybe 3 weeks ago, in the commission quarterly report, the issue of pesticides came up and whether that was something that the commission should be working on. And council said, well, let's look at it in terms of your entire work plan. And so we felt like in order to do that, we probably owed them like a more up-to-date work plan. So that's kind of what we're doing here. Great. Thank you, Rebecca. This is page 1. All right, so we didn't change anything because it's just the guidelines on page 1. If you want to move to page 2, and I want to actually pull the commission. I have 2 versions of this. One is with all the changes that we made accepted, and the other is with the changes highlighted so that you could see them, the changes that we made. Do people care one way or the other? What was given to you was with all the changes accepted. Would people prefer to see it the other way?
I'm good with it, with the changes accepted, just because it is a new work plan.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it would be confusing otherwise. So I'm in line with that too.
Okay, great. Thank you for that input. Okay, so this is the mission statement. We just tweaked it very slightly to add, so it reads, the Environmental Quality Commission is committed to helping the city of Menlo Park to be a leading sustainable city that is well positioned to manage present and future environmental impacts, including the grave threat of climate change. That's the part we added. The Environmental Quality Commission is charged primarily with advising the City Council on matters involving environmental protection, environmental improvement, sustainability, and climate change. Any comments, questions, additions?
I think that looks good, Josie, personally.
Okay. If you have objections, unmute yourself. I can't see everyone at once. So if you're like nodding, I don't like that. It would be hard for me I could see a few of you, but not all of you. So unmute yourself and object if you have. Okay, so sounds like we're in agreement on that. Again, very good. Okay, few changes. So we can move to the next page. This is just a list of everybody on the commission, and Leah would need, maybe staff can do this once we've finished, just a link to her. I think these get underlined because they're linked to email. But anyway, that can be done. Next page. Okay, so these got tweaked a little bit. So these are our list of priorities. You'll notice that we changed up at the very top. The Environmental Quality Commission has identified the following priorities to focus on during there's a typo, 2021. Oh, actually, it's a typo on mine, but not on yours. It looks like staff corrected it. Thank you, staff. 2021-22. We didn't do 21 to 23, which I think the last work plan was 3 years like that. And 21, 22, 23, because I don't know that we specifically talked about this in the subcommittee. I think we did, but just that we're trying to stay a little bit more nimble with just with climate change and shifting priorities. So I would recommend this be a 2-year work plan as opposed to a 3, but anyone want to weigh in pro or against on that?
I agree that 2 years, well, anyway, it has in the past been about the right interval. And I think things are changing so rapidly in terms of climate. And now we have this new climate action plan that I'd like to see it reviewed at least every 2 years. But I welcome others.
I think that's a good plan, Janelle. I would just only ask if the city, since this is a template kind of in a cadence that we get as guidance from the city, as long as that is not a problem. I can't imagine it would be, but as long as that kind of fits with the city's idea of these plans, it's not a problem, is it, Rebecca, if we change the time frame?
I don't see any issue with changing the timeline. It aligns with a 2-year work plan, essentially. It's just sometimes the timing doesn't always match up for when the EQC reviews their work plan. So I think you can go either way.
Okay, so any other objections to this? Okay, I'm hearing none. I will proceed. So the three priorities we identified were the climate action plan, urban canopy preservation, and then green and sustainable initiatives. Green and sustainable initiatives, we kind of changed it from something focused on buildings because now buildings are really being covered in the climate action plan. And we made it more of sort of a catch-all, I would say, for those things that are not climate related or tree related, but are still important and are still, under our purview. We don't want to not attend to them, so we wanted to give them a place. But the emphasis isn't there right now, or we're proposing that it not be there right now. Okay, so climate action plan, it reads, continue planning and supporting implementation of the city's 2030 climate action plan. There's a typo there. Climate action plan initiatives to achieve or surpass the city's greenhouse gas reduction target. Any thoughts for or against edits?
That sounds good to me.
Okay.
Josie, you mentioned a typo. Is that
Yeah.
in the number?
No, it's in, there's a word on between cities and 2030. I think when I was tracking changes, it was hard to see things like that. So it would read supporting implementation of the city's 2030 climate action plan initiatives. Take out the on, which I have noted on mine. Okay, so any other questions? We can move to number 2. Urban canopy preservation, continue to develop a comprehensive urban canopy strategy for Menlo Park, which includes monitoring the effectiveness of the city's heritage tree ordinance, hearing heritage tree appeals, and establishing an urban canopy inventory. So the only way that this changed was last time it was developing a heritage tree ordinance, and now we're just saying monitoring the effectiveness of it.
And the urban canopy inventory, we were saying we'd be hearing from Christian early next year about whether or not that was still a relevant aim, right?
That was my understanding, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think maybe we want to say consider, I can't, hold on. Instead of, since that one is a little bit more challenging, I would say instead of establishing an urban canopy inventory, maybe it should say consider establishing. So kind of the language is left a little bit looser because I don't know that that's really going to be dependent on resourcing and what kinds of tools are out there. And so I would just kind of prefer that it's a little bit more like looser, if that makes sense.
Yep. I'm fine with that. Anyone agree, disagree?
I agree.
Yeah, sounds right to me.
Yeah, seems fine.
Okay, great. Good. All right, anything else on number 2? Otherwise, we'll move to number 3. All right, number 3 says green and sustainable initiatives, expand and enhance sustainable development initiatives, including habitat protection, healthy ecology, environmental health protection, healthy air, surface water runoff quality, water conservation, and waste reduction. And I'm happy to kind of explain what we meant if any of those are confusing. The pesticides issue that's come up, I was thinking, I think we all three were thinking would go under environmental health protection. Surface water runoff quality is something that the city's supposed to be working on with kind of creating, I forget what they're called, but bioswales and that type of thing for water runoff, so that toxics don't enter the bay.
Yeah, the pesticide issue seems like it could fall under a number of these: habitat protection, healthy ecology, environmental health protection. It really could be even surface water runoff quality.
Mhm.
Are we avoiding specifically, I can't remember where we landed on this at the last meeting. Are we avoiding specifically mentioning pesticides until council directs that they want that to be a priority? Is that the reason why it's subsumed under one of these rather than listed explicitly?
Yeah, and actually we are not, the subcommittee is not recommending that it be a priority because we feel like between staff and us, like we have our hands full. But if the rest of the EQC disagrees and wants that to be a priority, we can absolutely add it. We could add it here, or we could add it under initiatives under number 3.
Josie, I've got a question, and I'm not even weighing in on that particular question, but stepping back for a broader question. The way this is written, it looks like we are committing to actually expand and enhance these initiatives. And I wonder if we would consider, instead of saying the word including, say which may include, which will give us some flexibility to not address some of this stuff. Like a lot of this I'm seeing for the first time, and I may have missed something, but like I have not known the EQC to address many of these issues ever in my in my tenure here, and I don't know that we would. Are we convinced that we want to address all of them?
No, and I think it's a really good point. And so maybe we could change expand and enhance to respond to, or something like that. If the community has these concerns, I have a feeling they would end up with us. And so we wanted to create a place for those to live. But I mean, we could change what's listed here. We could change including to which may include, or something like that. I think you're raising a good point.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion too. And that's what I was thinking in terms of, I mean, we might want to avoid pesticides being listed as a priority, but similarly, I don't know that water conservation is a major priority that we've spent a lot of time on or will be spending a lot of time on. So which may include, and then I would be curious to hear what everyone else has to say, but I wouldn't have an issue with including pesticides in that list of priorities that may be included, but just issues we could respond to as they come up.
Deb?
Yeah, what I agree with that kind of may include. I like that comment. And I also, since this is sort of a bucket of like, we do get pulled into various items for support purposes or recommendations. So I would rather not use active language such as expand and enhance, because we're really kind of, I would rather say something like supports or responds to, but something a little more passive for right now, unless we feel like there's something we really want to expand and enhance, right? So like maybe just tone that language down so it's more of a supporting position that we're taking. And then I don't necessarily think we need to think of everything that could be and couldn't be. We could say may include, but is not limited to, or something like that.
Okay, I like that. I would agree. I would suggest that we change expand and enhance to support. So it would read support sustainable development initiatives, which may include and everything. And what about the pesticides, in or out?
I would include the but not limited to language as well, so that
Okay.
it doesn't sound like it's just these things. But I don't really have an opinion regarding whether pesticides should be called out specifically or not. Because I think it'll fit in there in any of those, in a number of those categories.
Yeah. I appreciate, so I've heard James, I'm on the fence. Anyone else have an opinion on this one?
I don't think it matters either way. If we're asked to take up pesticides, we certainly will, but I don't know that leaving it out of the specified list does anything or has any impact. So I'm neutral.
I agree with Vice Chair London. I think that pesticides are a factor, and many of the things in here are goals. And so I don't even know how to mention pesticides. They would need other words with it. So I'm fine with omitting it and recognizing it. We will take it up to protect healthy air, surface water, runoff, etc., if directed to.
Yeah.
I think that's where I'm landing. James, are you okay with that?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay. Okay, so what I've got is support sustainable development initiatives, which may include but not be limited to habitat protection, healthy ecology, environmental health protection, healthy air, surface runoff quality, water conservation, and waste reduction. Okay, let's move to page number 5. And I had a question on this one, actually, the subcommittee did for staff. This is, here we're supposed to be reviewing the purpose of the commission as defined by Menlo Park City Council Policy 3.13.01. I didn't know actually how to look up that policy to even know if it's relevant still, but, and to see whether what's written here still is aligned with that policy. And then I had a question about, is this up for our revision at all, or is this just something that we receive from council and don't really have an opportunity to change, or don't have an opportunity to change in this document? That's a question for Rebecca, I think.
Thank you, Commissioner Gillard. So this is the policy that City Clerk Judy Herring presented basically to the EQC, was it October? A couple of months ago. And so it can't be changed. I can check to make sure that it's aligned with what's in that policy that she presented a couple of months ago. But that's where this language has come from.
Okay.
So City Council approved policy of what the commission advises on.
Okay, can you make sure they sync up, because this document is a couple years, this verbiage is a couple years old, and I can't remember if when Judy presented, if we tweaked that in any way. I kind of thought we did, but.
Yeah, I'll double check.
Okay, thank you. Alrighty, so that lays out that we have these duties related to natural areas, recycling and solid waste reduction, environmentally sustainable practices, air and water pollution prevention, climate protection, and water and energy conservation. Next bucket is related to trees in the urban canopy, using best practices to maintain city trees and making determinations on appeals of heritage tree removal permits. And then the last bullet there is organizing Arbor Day. Okay. So now with step 2, I just repeated the mission statement that we already did. So to the extent that we made changes there, I'll reflect them there too. And then step 3 is discuss any priorities already established by City Council. So the only one I could kind of come up with was making gains on the climate action plan. But I've only been on the commission for a little over a year. So if there are other explicit priorities that council has given us, let me know. Deb?
I think if I recall correctly, every year the city puts out priorities, not necessarily related to sustainability, but just priorities for the city. And I know that in years past when we've done this, we've looked at what their overarching priorities are to see if there's any sort of anything where we fit in. And I don't know where they are in that cycle, but I do seem to recall that is some of where we got that from before. But I would agree with you, as it stands right now, climate action plan is we know that that's a priority. Rebecca, do you know anything about like their priorities for 2021 or? I guess, I don't know if they've started those discussions.
No, they have not just started the discussions for their priorities for 2021. But I can bring up what their priorities were adopted in August of 2020 for the year 2020. And I think that's where the commission can look at what are the list of projects or programs that the council has prioritized. And are there any of those projects that potentially align with the EQC's commission work, and those 3 priority areas that you've listed above. And some of the projects do intersect with greenhouse gas reductions. I could bring up briefly what those priorities are, if that's
Yeah,
helpful.
that'd be good.
Okay,
That'd be good.
let me just find that. Okay, let me share this here. Oops. Can you see it?
Yes.
Is it-
Yes. The bigger, the better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Better.
Bigger.
Oh, even better. Yes.
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 Okay.
Okay.
And so I'm sorry to interrupt you, Commissioner Gellard, but just to, so this is the 2020 to 2021 fiscal year. So the city council toward probably the end of January next year will be establishing potentially a new work plan. It could have these projects again carry over to that work plan. There may be things added or taken off depending on, again, resources. So I just want to make sure that the commission's aware of that there is going to be a discussion on that quite shortly by the city council.
Yeah, so far, I think most of this is actually covered in the climate action plan. Like there's a bunch of things related to VMT reduction, but that's called out in our work plan. Like the TMP, TMA, bicycling, the housing element, rezoning.
Yeah, speaking of the housing element, I'm looking at the staff report that goes along with this figure right now. And one thing that I do see that jumps out is they specifically call out preparation of an environmental justice element in their housing element. One other area where I see environment mentioned in here, but I'm not sure how we'd assist.
Yeah.
I'm also
I mean,
wondering what item 12 is too. There's an development environmental review process education series. I'm not sure what that is either.
I think that's sort of educating the public about EIRs and the development process, like how does, for example, like in District 1, educating District 1 residents about how do all the projects that are getting approved over there, like how does that work and where do citizens have an opportunity to weigh in? I think that's what that means.
Yeah, that's what it looks like looking at the staff report, educating the public on how EIRs work and how the California Environmental Quality Act works as well.
So the environmental justice one is a good question. I think that, what we're trying to do, getting natural gas out of homes, that is one way in which, folks who live in homes with combustion and children get exposed to it. There are higher rates of asthma. So that's sort of one issue. I would also say with our action number 6 in the climate action plan, which is focused on coming up with a plan for addressing sea level rise, which mostly affects District 1. I see that as through an environmental justice lens. I don't know, do other people have thoughts about, but so I guess what I'm saying is I think we're covered. I wouldn't add anything based on this, but what do you all think?
Yeah, quite frankly, I'm more interested in 2021 which I know we don't have access to right now, but I think we're looking at a 2020 plan with 3 weeks left to go in 2020. So it sort of seems like, I kind of agree with you. The climate action plan is sort of where I would keep it at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you, Rebecca. If we can return to and go to page 6 then.
Okay, and right before we move on, can I make a kind of news flash quick announcement? Which is, sorry, would you guys like to either stop at 7 or take a break at 6:30? There's some people on the call who need to attend to things. I have a hard stop at 7, so we could kind of weigh this, but maybe check in at about 6:25 and see how we're doing and what we want to do, if that's okay with folks.
Yeah,
That works.
And Janelle, and just so you know, I had to make this announcement early. I unfortunately have to leave early tonight. So my apologies. I have a sort of urgent matter that came up, so I will hang on as long as I can. But
No
I
worries.
probably am going to need to leave relatively shortly, unfortunately. Yeah.
Thanks for letting us know. Okay, great.
Thanks, Deb.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to page 6.
Okay, can you see the page or the work plan?
I can see the work plan. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Again,
Yeah.
if there's any way you can, well, I guess to fit on the page, it has to be only so big, but I will get a magnifying glass soon.
Okay. Oh, that's good. So this one was to brainstorm the goals, project or priorities of the commission. And so what we did, there's like 3 groups here, and each one starts with the high level goal so climate action plan, urban canopy preservation, and green and sustainable initiatives. So climate action plan, we're sort of breaking out what's the detail here. And what I did was I just pulled in all of the 6 actions from the climate action plan, not the full descriptions, but just the very high level short descriptions, and put them there. And then if you want to scroll, so you can see action 1, action 2, action 3. So those are all things you guys know.
Yeah.
And then just below action number 6, if you can scroll down, this is going to be a little weird because it flows over to the next page, but there were 2 additional items which the subcommittee noticed were on the old plan and wanted to keep, and thought it was most relevant to the climate action plan. One is recommend 2021-22 climate action for council adoption. And that means, when the council adopted the 6 actions, that was in response to COVID. Originally, we were going to propose like 60 actions over 3 years. And instead we said, we'll strip it down to 6 because we don't have the funding this year. We'll strip it down to 6 and that'll just be for 1 year, but we're going to come back in June and we're going to recommend, hopefully we'll have finished those actions and we'll recommend actions for the next year. And if funding is available, maybe for 3 years. So in not too long, we should start thinking about what we would recommend. So go back to that list of 66 and think, okay, we did 6, which will be the next 6 or whatever it might be. So that's what that bullet means. And then the bullet right below, support adoption of impactful Cal Green and energy reach codes for 2022 building code update. So that's when we passed reach codes, those went into effect January 1 of 2020. The next code cycle for Title 24 would be going into effect January 1, 2023. For whatever reason, they call those the 2022 building code update. So the question is, we pass those reach codes. Do we want to, if the state doesn't adopt that to be the state law or the state code, what we did, do we want to re-up the reach codes for the next code cycle? And there's a possibility that there'll be something from Cal Green, which is another sort of standard, and Tom can say more about it, but another standard that the state might put out, and we could just say, we adopt that, as opposed to having to go through that like laborious process again with reach codes. So that's what those are. Any questions or objections, suggestions? All right, I'm not seeing anything. Okay, so go back up to the top, Rebecca, or to the top of page 6. So the benefits, I don't know. Do you guys want to go through this? We just did our best up, made our best effort at, like, if we did all these things, what would be the benefits? Hopefully you guys have had a chance to read it or could read it, but do you want me to go through them?
I mean, at first glance, they all look spot on to me. So
Yeah.
I don't feel like you need to do that.
I agree. They're really good.
Okay. And we did, James, to your point, we did include increased equity and environmental justice there as a benefit. Okay. So we decided, yes, it was climate action plans are mandated by state, local law, and we now have passed a climate action plan. So according to our council direction, it is required. And then does it require any policy changes? Yes, the climate action plan will require new policies passed by council. So that was a yes on the checkbox for the 4th column. Resources, we identified subcommittees, partnerships with other organizations and businesses and commissions, like the Complete Streets Commission, maybe the Planning Commission for some of the VMT work, staff time, consultants and contractors. 2 years, and the measurement criteria were just the ones that were in the climate action plan. So I just pulled those right out of there, which reminds me that we should, and Rebecca, I think that this is really gonna have to be a staff item for implementation. We did identify these metrics that we want to track for the CAP. For example, how many gas water heaters get replaced with electric, et cetera. So I don't know if Joanna or somebody's working on setting up tracking mechanisms for those things, but somebody should do that. Okay.
I just want to check in.
Okay.
Were you looking for a response or?
Sure.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was a question. Sorry.
Okay.
So, of course, staff's aware of tracking the measurements. I think right now our challenge is resources still. And so we're, again, very much focused on accomplishing, what council has asked staff to do, number 1, 3, and 5. And so we're kind of hitting our limits, but we're going to try to figure out how to get some of these can be accomplished fairly easy. Others may, again, not only impact our staff time, but other departments' time as well. So I just want to be mindful of that. And I think with the BGI initiative, I think that's going to be helpful in a lot of ways where we can track gasoline sales or EV purchases. And Commissioner London has been very helpful in that regard. So again, we're trying to check off as many of the lists, but I can't make any promises at this time with just the amount of work we're doing at this stage.
I think it was just one of these things that we included in the CAP. You guys wanted us to include like very specific metrics, not greenhouse gas metrics, but things that could be individual things that could be easily measured. So we did that. And I just wanted to make sure, because we said in the CAP, we said we were going to measure these things. I just wanted to make sure that somebody's looking at that. And it sounds like you are. Would it be appropriate for us to request that you guys kind of show us what you're thinking, or which ones you're able to track or whatever at a future meeting?
Yeah, I think that would be a very good discussion to have.
Okay, so maybe we can.
Sorry, I can provide some of those as well.
Great. And maybe we can just, get that on the agenda for a future meeting. Would be great.
I have a quick question about the metrics. I noticed that we have partner with other organizations, and I'm wondering if some of these, if we can leverage off, sorry, I got a new puppy. If we can possibly leverage off metrics that may be collected by some partners that we know of, or just any leverage opportunities. I think that might be helpful if we can seek any of those out, or if we know any of them. I'm gonna go on mute, sorry. I've got a 14-month-old border collie. I mean, 14-week-old border collie.
Yeah, I think Deb, you probably see that some of them are things where the data source is Menlo Park, but a lot of them are data source like other DMV, like there's just information on websites that we can scrape really easily, or Peninsula Clean Energy providing data. So yes, I think whenever we can, the intent was to use somebody else's data. And this shouldn't be an involved for the things that Menlo Park is tracking, you know, there have to be systems set up to track it, right? When someone gets a permit for a new heat pump water heater or heat pump space heater, we want to be able to track that and report it. But for everything else, I think it's pretty much using somebody else's data and just knowing where to look. Okay. And so in that case, the function is just kind of gathering it. All right, so unless there are other questions or suggestions on this one, we can move to the second bucket, which is the urban canopy preservation. Okay, so this just repeats the main goal, which is you know, monitoring the effectiveness of the heritage tree ordinance, hearing heritage tree appeals, and I'll change that to consider establishing, like we did up front. And then the bullets underneath are assess the effectiveness of the heritage tree ordinance and recommend adjustments as needed. And second bullet is influence and enable the creation of an inventory and catalog of the urban tree canopy. Do we want to change that to consider?
Yeah, I think so, to be consistent with the language we changed earlier.
Okay. Maybe I'll just say consider enabling. Okay, and then, you know, the benefits would be improved awareness and satisfaction with the heritage tree policies in the city and efficient functioning of the heritage tree policies. So making sure that like whoever is doing, you know, whoever is supposed to be doing different things is doing it, and it's the handoffs are smooth and everyone knows who's doing what, as well as this sort of the public being aware of how it all works and feeling satisfied. To me, when we get a lot of appeals, that means either people don't understand the ordinance or they're dissatisfied with it. And so to the extent that a refresh on the heritage tree ordinance was an attempt to you know, address those issues, we should see fewer appeals. That's the hope. Any questions on that? Okay, so yes, this is, I think it's, hold on, I forget what the column header is, the next one. Yes, it is mandated by our city ordinance, at least the heritage tree appeals function is. And then does it involve policy changes? I don't see any big policy changes coming out of this area, so we said no. This would be subcommittee, resources would be subcommittee, and the staff time budgeted for the heritage tree and whatever might be Christian's time for the urban tree canopy inventory. And let's see, what is ongoing? I forget what that applies to. Estimated completion time. Yeah, we didn't set a completion time. It's just sort of ongoing activities. And then in terms of the metrics, periodic reports, for example, from Christian, you know, number of heritage tree appeals, then reduction in the number of healthy trees removed is another thing we could measure. An increase in the diversity and quality of the trees within the entire urban canopy, improved coordination with the planning process, and inventory and catalog of urban tree canopy. So just having one, I guess, would be, you know, measuring success. Any questions about any of that, changes? No, okay. Trees, done. Next is green and sustainable initiatives. Okay, so I will make the changes that we decided to make. I'll just repeat them here at the top. And then underneath that, I just bulleted out some of the specifics that were, so supporting initiatives, improving air and water quality, supporting initiatives, protecting health, environmental health, support initiatives that reduce waste, that conserve water, and improve the quality of the water runoff in the city. Any questions, suggestions? Okay, benefits are listed there. We can read them. So no, none of these are necessarily related to policies or required by state policy that I know of. But yes, would they require, for example, if we did a pesticide posting ordinance, yes, that would require new policy by the city, by council. So that's why we checked yes there. And here we said create a subcommittee if needed. And you'll see, I think you saw hopefully in the recommendations for subcommittees that I recommended one additional subcommittee in addition to the ones that I presented last at our last meeting, which combines trees and these activities into one subcommittee. All right, so the work would be ongoing, and then how would we measure success? Like what would the metrics be? Number of asthma cases, air quality measured by sensors throughout the city, which I know have been installed, toxin levels in the water runoff. I don't know currently if that's something we measure, but it, you know, we could look into that if we thought that was important. Water consumption and volume of solid waste generated. One thing I'll mention about water consumption, because somebody brought it up, I think that will be more of an issue as climate change gets worse, that we will have more drought. And so I do think the issue of the availability of water will be, I mean, we've had it here in Menlo Park, I know throughout the decades, 3-year periods where, you know, people can't water their lawns or can only do it very sparingly. I think that will become more the norm for us. So I do think we'll probably have to weigh in as a kind of an offshoot of the climate work that we're doing in adaptation to climate.
Yeah, Josie, just to give you some perspective, this is during our drought period, our committee spent a lot of time on that issue. We also weighed in on the Wello plan and just various different water conservation initiatives. So that's a great example of something that becomes very timely and comes to the commission with some added need of support. So I would expect that would come up again, but that was an example of something that came up a little bit more urgently, and then we really shifted our focus and spent time around that particular issue.
Yeah, I can foresee that happening for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for that history and context. Any questions on this one? Suggestions?
Hi, Commissioner Gillard. This is Rebecca, Sustainability Manager. There are some state mandates for stormwater water quality. So some of them there are not. So I don't know if you can check yes and no on that, but there are some mandates that are related to water quality and air quality as well, and water conservation and waste reduction actually too.
Okay.
So
I will change the checkbox. Yes,
and I wanted to offer a suggestion. I know typically the work plans have they typically outline their goals, but I'm looking at that last column, and so part of the questions it raises for me is, yes, staff can monitor these things, but I think the intent of the work plan is how will the commission know that, you know, that they've made progress? Did the city council adopt a new REACH code, right? Did they do something with the information that you've been able to collect and research? Or, you know, did they direct staff now to work on this new initiative as a result of your work? And so I don't know if there's a possibility to kind of frame it or think in that kind of terms. And I know the work plan is not the clearest. We're using the same format that we've used for many years. So, but I only offered suggestions as to what, you know, I've seen over the years, and kind of also just looking, and I think you can do this with the subcommittees as well, have what the deliverables are. You know, is there going to be a memo from the EQC to the city council, you know, whether it's a pesticide policy or, you know, on the future actions of the CAP, like what's the next CAP action initiatives look like that you want city council to adopt?
Got it. Yeah, I definitely interpreted that measurement criteria column in a different way. And so I guess it's a question to the commission. Do we want to redo this column for all of the 3 buckets? To be more around like policies or recommendations, as opposed to like for the CAP section, it's like, how will we know how we're doing? Well, if there are fewer water heaters in town, if there are fewer furnaces powered by natural gas, you know, fewer gas cars, et cetera. I guess what Rebecca's saying is in the past, it would be like pass a burnout ordinance or create a program for EV charging and multifamily or something like that. So what do you guys think? Do you want to change it?
This is Tom. I'd like to explore it for a moment. It sounds like that Sustainability Manager Lucky was mentioning that the items that often have been in the right-hand column have been closer to deliverables and or ideas of how will we know council has been satisfied, you know, that we've successfully advised them. Whereas what's listed in there right now are, you know, real things going on in the environment, as opposed to process documents like achieve. Well, the one for this one could be meet council directives. To the extent they give us some, but I don't know what they are yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe we do change it to be that, although I kind of love having the actual results that benefit the climate and health and equity, all those things right in the plan. But I get you know, the kind of intent of this section is deliverables, it sounds like, and then we can refer to the climate action plan for achievements. Never resting, just knowing that we could put in place a policy or an ordinance or something like that. You know, the proof has to be in actual actions that help.
Hey guys, I just want to chime in real quick while I have a moment. Unfortunately, I'm going to need to leave the conversation. So I just wanted to offer up that as you talk about subcommittees, I can talk with Josie, I can talk with you offline. I mean, I'm here till April of this year, so I'm happy to help where I can in my kind of limited time left. So I would offer to you all to choose your committees as you see fit. And then I'm happy to fill in where we see a good fit for me, given my tenure. And then, so that's one thing I just wanted to say to you as you think about that part of the conversation. And the other, just to echo on what's going on with this last thing, I think that I'm kind of struggling with this too, because the work plan is typically a little bit more focused around what we plan to do. And this is almost more in some ways what the role of our city staff is to, there's a lot of these things woven in here are kind of almost like compliance programs too, that the city manages. And I don't know, Rebecca, maybe the route to go here is to, which we've done before, is to put something a little more specific. Like if you know that there's a new initiative you need to work on this year, or like you did with the zero waste plan, that we can be a little bit more targeted in the 2-year frame because otherwise this is more like ad hoc committee stuff like that just comes up, which is, I don't think I think the work plan is, to your point, what do you plan to do? How do you plan on doing it? And what's your success criteria? So this is kind of, I'm struggling with this one here because it's almost too open-ended and is more of a sort of general bucket of any other ad hoc stuff that come our way. So I'm just going to leave you with that thought. You guys can talk amongst yourself, because I wish I could stay longer. I'm so sorry, but hopefully that's helpful thoughts for you to consider for the rest of the meeting. In my
Yeah,
absence.
thank you, Deb.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Have a good
Deb.
night and happy
Happy
holidays to
holidays.
you all. Okay.
Bye.
Happy
Bye-bye.
holidays.
All right, take care.
I
So-
just want to, sorry, Commissioner
Go
Gillett, I know
ahead.
you can't
Yeah,
see
yeah.
us all, but just to chime in on what Deb, it's a hard kind of place with the work plan. But, for an example for this one, and I know it's not a priority of the Environmental Quality Commission to work on the pesticide policy, but that could be, that is your green and sustainable initiative that you'll work on over the next 2 years if there is commissioners interested and if there's time that allots, right? And then your how you'll measure what you're doing, right, could be we've prepared a potential policy options for council to consider and direct staff to work on, right, as that measurement. And I think the perfect one too that you mentioned earlier with the cap was, what actions should the city focus on after we've completed 1, 3, and 5. And I would almost say 1, 3, and 5 are already authorized to be worked on and to be completed. And so if there is, I think it's the other items that are still that the council is looking to the EQC for advice on, and also to provide that ongoing support for 1, 3, and 5 as well. So staff can bring back, here's where we are in the process. We'd like your feedback so that we can also let the council know what your advice is on that progress. Does that make, is that helpful or to clarify?
Yeah, so I guess I'm just sort of digesting it, and would it be correct to say that going back to like at the top of page 6, so step 4, that instead of under climate action plan, like the specific actions, that it's more like, supporting staff implementation of action number 1,
Mm-hmm.
like that? Is that what you're thinking?
I think that would be a good approach, because I'm looking at the top of the column too, and it's brainstorm goals, projects, or priorities. And so some of these will be projects. Some of them are, yes, helping to assist staff in carrying out the already approved council action items. But there's still a lot left, right, that we haven't really nutted through at the staff level. And that would be, again, great work for the EQC. Like, what's the expectation on, well, you've already commented on 2, 4, and 6, right, but is there anything else that you would want to see, since we're not particularly working on this fiscal year? And I know you've given a plan to kind of tackle that, but what is, 2021, 2022 look like in these areas? And even for these other actions. So one, the ones that council has authorized, is there any further actions you're hoping to see move forward after those activities are completed? Are we done, or is there more? I'm assuming that there's
Yeah, so
gonna be more.
I tried to capture that one in the bullet point on the next page, which is recommend 2021-22 climate action for
Mhm.
council adoption. So
Yeah.
I tried to capture that there. But I can go back and change. It sounds like both column number 1 and column number 7 to be more around what are the specific deliverables that the EQC would provide. Does that make sense?
That could be helpful, yes.
Does that
For
seem right?
the EQC.
Does that
I'll
seem
leave it
right
up
to
to you.
everybody?
Yeah.
A yes from Janelle.
Yes.
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 Okay. All right. Maybe the subcommittee can meet again and work on that. Okay. In terms of the substance, seems like we're aligned on the substance, but we kind of have to, instead of going to like the actual results we want to go to the intermediate step of what's the policy plan's specific work deliverables. But in terms of sort of the buckets and what we're covering, do people feel so far like it's rough, that part of it is roughly, seems right?
Yeah, it all looks good to me. I guess I've been trying to think of what, for example, the deliverables will be for, say, urban canopy preservation. So, but all the other columns look right to me. I just don't have any ideas off the top of my head as what we could list as a deliverable for that.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking of the deliverable for that, it might be our opinion of how important we think an inventory would be after we hear from the arborist about an inventory. So we would, the deliverable would be our opinion and advice regarding an inventory.
Yeah, and I think it can also include, what are other cities doing as part of inventory? So maybe helping the city to understand how other cities are tracking the health of the urban forest. And, even probably tapping some of the Heritage Tree Task Force members that had thoughts on this as well would be a great resource on that. And yeah, I'm trying to think as well. I mean, we have some measurements of, like if the EQC experiences less appeals, does that mean the process is working or not? I think you could potentially provide council a report on that as to, what are your thoughts on how the effectiveness based on the EQC's perspective, or you can go deeper in that area.
I want to make sure I captured, Tom, what was I didn't have my pen handy when you said it would be like provide advice on the whether to do the canopy inventory?
Right, because I think what I'm hearing is that the arborist may present to us a suggestion about whether to do an inventory and what it would cost and what it would produce. And then it's our duty to advise the council about what we thought ought to happen in an inventory.
Okay.
If one was being proposed. So
Okay.
the deliverables kind of our advice. So it might be a memo on our advice.
Okay. Got it. All right. Okay. Do we want to move to page 9? So this is where let's assume that the deliverables here or the tasks will look different. It'll be more like develop a policy for action number 3 or develop a policy for action number 1 as opposed to just the action itself. But I do want to get your thoughts on timing. So what the subcommittee decided was that action on number 1 was urgent, and then 3 and 5, because those have been approved for this fiscal year, would go in that 1-year time frame, and in the 2-year time frame that would capture 2, 4, and 6, which were approved but not approved for this year. And then the items we added were that in under, let's see, 1, 2, the third column, 1 year, the third bullet, which is just coming up with those recommendations for the next batch of climate action for city council adoption. And then I slotted into year 2 at the bottom there, support new climate actions. So once we recommend whatever those new actions are, actually support those. So that would be happening next year or next fiscal year. So starting like in June. And then the last one would be the adoption of the CalGreen or Energy Reach codes for 2022. And then long-term here, just improving communication with the community about the climate action plan, and then inspiring other cities to adopt some of the policies or climate action plans similar to ours. That was one of our goals in the climate action plan, was not just to do these things ourselves, but to actually catalyze action on a broader scale so that that would have an impact on our sea level rise situation. What do you guys think about the timing?
I
Sorry,
think the timing laid out here looks great to me. The one caveat I would make is that by long term, I sure don't think of it as waiting until we've finished the 2 years to start improving communication or inspiring other cities. So it's kind of the things in column 4 are an ongoing priority for me.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I agree. I wish we were just going to get them done and then that was it. But I think it is going to be a lot of ongoing effort. And you know, some of these things we're trying to do per year, and it's an increasing difficulty, like gasoline sales, cutting them 10% per year. I mean, as we get past the pandemic, it's just going to get really challenging. So we may be very busy with that, and I wouldn't want to ever take it off until we achieve it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I will again rewrite the actual actions to be more around policy and program development by the commission, but I'll kind of keep this rough buckets time-wise, keep those the same. Okay, can we go to page 10?
Yes.
So this is,
Sorry. Just before we move on, I realized I think I forgot to ask for public comment.
Oh.
And I think you're still kind of introducing this, but we're also way into discussion. So let me just pause for one moment and ask if there's any member of the public who had public comment on this, this item.
Thank you, Chair Price. If there are any members or attendees in the audience that would like to speak on this agenda item, please raise your hand, which is the feature that's right next to your name, and I will be able to unmute your microphone and allow you to talk. And with that said, I do not see any hands raised at this time.
All right. Sorry for the interruption. Carry on.
oh no. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's a little, since it's a working meeting, it's less present and discuss and more just dive right in. Okay, so then just repeating for the urban canopy preservation, I just took the bullet points and tried to allocate them across years. And so I put the assess effectiveness of the heritage tree ordinance as something we would be doing in, so I guess per our work plan, it would be 2021, so the coming year, assessing how is it going and making any recommendations for adjustments. And then next year, 2022, we would be looking at this, the inventory, the urban tree inventory. But we may, if Christian's going to come to us with that this year, I guess we could bump it into 2021. Would you all agree with that?
That's fine, I think.
Agreed.
Okay. All right. And then for the green and sustainable initiatives, again, these are things that we're thinking are just going to be sort of ongoing and responding to whether it's council or the public, or like Deb said, drought comes up and we just have to jump in and do it. But for now, I just was trying to focus our attention more on the CAP for this year. And so I pushed these out to year 2. You know, if there's anything we want to, well, obviously we would respond as needed, but to the extent that there's anything we want to like dive into, that would be a year 2 activity. But maybe I mean, is there a way to just put these up? I guess we could put them all into long-term.
Yeah.
Since we don't have anything specific in mind for them.
Yeah.
thoughts on that? Yeah, yay or nay?
Yeah, that makes sense to me too.
Right, it makes sense to me too. There's not a schedule for them, so they don't
Mhm.
need to land in year 1 or 2.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, so I will bump those into long term. And so the question was, one member of council has asked about pesticides. And then when Ryan presented to council and asked for clarification, like, is this a directive coming from the entire council, or is just this the wish of one council member? The answer was, they didn't vote, but the answer was, well, we might make it a directive, but we want to see how your whole work plan and how this might fit in. So what are your guys' thoughts? Do we want to put pesticides on here? Do we want to not, and explain why? Or what do you want to do? Don't all jump at once.
I don't know that it really matters. I'm kind of ambivalent. We can put it on here or we can not put it on and wait to be asked about it. I just don't think it matters.
Yeah, and just to add to Commissioner Gillard, they had a consensus that they wanted the EQC to examine the issue. So it is a tough kind of area to navigate. I mean, that was the main reason to kind of look at the work plan and then also realize we need to update it as well. So again, there would be a staff report that would accompany the work plan. So if the EQC chooses not to include it, then I would explain in the staff report the rationale from the EQC based on the action taken. But I would also, again, suggest if that is what council is seeking potentially under green and sustainable initiatives, because there is a lot under green and sustainable initiatives, and if this is the one thing that council is seeking to probably look at under this priority, then you could potentially add it and then add it as the long term. Like, to Commissioner Gillard's point is, the urgency of climate change is great, and we want to spend a lot of our time and energy in this area. And if there is, time or commission bandwidth to do that, then we can address this other council potential directive. And so the way the council, they couldn't vote on it at the time in November because it wasn't in the work plan. And so it needs to be in the work plan for the full council to take the action on it. So that's where there's this kind of chicken and egg kind of thing with trying to figure out how to get from the council directing the EQC to look at something that is not part of any kind of projects or priorities.
Okay. Go
But
ahead.
it doesn't need to be specifically called out in the work plan, because we can't think of every single thing that would ever come up in the, right? It just, as long as it fits into this bucket.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, my advice would be, if they are asking for it, and we get direction from council as well at a staff level. If they're specifically asking it to have it put in there, then yes, I think that is them saying we want to see it in there, but figure out how to make it work with your timing. And again, it could be removed if council doesn't see that as a priority, or there's another green and sustainable initiative. Because I think, and you can let me know what your thoughts are on it as well, but there's, again, a lot under this green and sustainable. I think you need to pick one. You can't do it all.
Right.
And so maybe if that is the one thing that council is seeking, then that seems doable. Again, it doesn't need to be done like as a priority. It could be that long-term issue, but it's just recognizing that is what council is asking to look at. And once the entire council sees the work plan, they can vote to say, no, thank you, council member, Mueller, we respect that you wanted to put that, but we feel like these other issues are more important, and we don't want to see that on their work plan, and we don't want to see them working on it. So,
Okay.
like I said, it's a tough area to navigate.
Okay, so what I'm gonna suggest is, back on page 8, under those bullets, we add a explicit one that says develop recommendation for pesticide ordinance, or research pesticide ordinance. We can decide, and then that would go into either year 2 or long term, I would recommend. So
Yeah.
question, two things. One is, what do you guys think of that as a bullet? Research recommendation for pesticide ordinance.
This is Tom. I think research recommendation for pesticide ordinance is a reasonable thing to do. And when I think about the type of suggestions that the council member or members have had so far, they don't strike me as environmental issues. They strike me as health warning issues. And because it was to have, to research having an announcement of intent to use a pesticide at a particular location, which that announcement would go out, I'm thinking, to a limited number of people, nearby people, maybe being a sign in a yard. And
Yep,
so
that's a good point.
to me, it's looking like a health matter as opposed to an environmental quality matter. And so it'd be interesting to see what other communities have done about this and which department it ends up with.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because like, to your point, James, this could, if we were restricting the use of pesticides, it would affect water, it would affect creatures, habitat, et cetera. But if it's just, you can still use it, you just have to post it. Well, the creatures aren't going to benefit and the water's not going to benefit from that, right? It's just a human health benefit, potentially. People can avoid contact.
Yeah, I think keeping it as, like you were saying, research or recommendation.
Research or recommendation.
Something like that leaves it a little more open and a little more vague for us to, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, that as they've formulated it right now, it is more of a health concern than an environmental concern, but it gives us room to, if they do want us to look into this more, to consider it more from an environmental angle, if we just leave the language as research or recommendation. And I'd support putting it in either 2 years or long term.
Great. Anyone else want to weigh in on the bullet would be research recommendation for pesticide? How about pesticide? Is it use or pest? Yeah, let's make it use ordinance. It might just be posting, but anyone else want to weigh in? Does that sound okay for a bullet? And then would you put it in year 2 or long term?
So I guess I wonder what the term research obligates us to do. Is it the same as consider, or is it actually like dig in and do some research? And to me, it sounds more involved than maybe we are planning to actually be or will be asked to be.
I've only been on the EQC a year and a half, and I've done a whole lot of research on climate. So I don't really know what the expectations are usually or how this usually goes. So I feel a little, that's hard.
Yeah, I'm okay with it being research. I just want to get a sense of the group, what you guys think that means that we're planning to do.
Perhaps we could review research that somebody else does. So we'd be a body they bring research to and make a case that, staff may do the research and make a case they want to do this or that. And we would hear it and make our recommendation.
The other, I'm a little reluctant. I mean, I just want staff to be focused on climate right now. So I'm a little reluctant to ask staff to do stuff like that. But generally, that would be a good idea. I will tell you that I saw when I remember and Miss Lucky reminded me that this came to us, or maybe it was Tom actually, it came to us from Mueller, Councilmember Mueller, and it was another city had done it. And I think it was an example of the ordinance they had done. He was forwarding that to us. So my idea of what research would be was to find a couple cities and what did they do and read their ordinances and, present. We looked at 3 cities and
Okay,
is what we found.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, and year 2 or long term?
All right, boy, it's hard to say.
Raise your hand if you want year 2. Raise your hand if you want it in long-term.
Fine.
Okay, all right, it's going in long-term. Okay, I think we are almost done. Oh, we are done. Thank you. So I will make these changes and maybe Miss Lucky, tell me, I will make these changes. We can circulate it to the commission and then at our next meeting, maybe review it one last time more briefly and then vote on it.
Yes, that can be the process, right?
Okay. Great. Can we, how are people on time and can we, how do people feel about circling back to the issue of subcommittees and divvying those up at this meeting?
Can I toss it to Ms. Lucky to say, to just ask, is it okay to go until 7 or do we need to take a break at 6:30? What do you prefer?
Thank you for asking, Commissioner London. I think you can, if the commission wishes to carry on and there's no breaks needed. I think my kids are entertained right now. So. They found some food.
The situation could change. Feel free to pipe in.
They
They're
forged themselves in
resourceful.
the refrigerator. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, great. Entertaining at the fridge. Yeah, that's always good.
As long as it wasn't a lot of sugar. So.
Okay, and is the rest of the commission okay to carry on until 7 o'clock?
Sure. Populating the subcommittees is and then just any commissioner announcements is the last order of business, right? Yeah.
That's right. Okay, let's rock it. Thank you, and thank you, Commissioner Gaylord. That was an excellent presentation and lots of good thought went into that, so we thank you for that.
It was also Commissioner Elkins and Commissioner Cabot.
Commissioner Elkins and Cabot, thank you very much for that excellent and thoughtful presentation. It saved a lot of time. I'll just say from past years on the EQC that normally this process can take much longer, and you guys did just a brilliant job of getting it right. Thank you.
Okay, so this is a recap, just sort of getting a little bit more detailed about the things I presented at the last meeting, which was this sort of table showing the different subcommittees that could address the cap. And so it's bulleted out more explicitly, like what, if you joined that subcommittee, are the types of things that you could work on. And I ended up adding one to catch the trees and sustainable initiatives, so that we have some people to do that one. And so that would be everything related to, well, first of all, Arbor Day. I think Ryan was this subcommittee of one last year. And then Heritage Tree Ordinance recommendations, the urban tree canopy, and then, you know, all of those other things, the habitat protection, healthy ecology. If we did something on pesticides, it would be that group. And then I think the others were maybe were pretty clear when I presented them before, but building decarbonization would basically be action number 1 from the climate action plan, and number 5. So just supporting the city as it's trying to decarbonize its buildings. The transportation decarbonization subcommittee, that would be everything related to transportation. So that's actions 2, 3, 4, and 5 from the climate action plan. So that would be things like looking at the technical and financial feasibility of programs to increase access to EV charging, reviewing the offerings of service providers who might be able to assist building owners in building out EV charging network for multifamily, and then also in public places throughout the city. You know, reviewing any sort of legal frameworks that the staff might be considering for that. With this one, there's an opportunity to be a liaison with the Complete Streets Commission as they're thinking about VMT reduction. since that one overlaps with their work and then the climate action plan, I think it would be good for the two commissions to have some, knowledge of what the other is doing. I think the VMT reduction will mostly reside with Complete Streets, but I think it's good for us to stay aware of it. And assisting the city with the conversion of its fleet over to EVs. Yeah. Any questions about those two so far? Those two subcommittees? And then the adaptation and outreach subcommittees, again, this is just recapping what we discussed last time, but for adaptation, members of the subcommittee could attend the San Mateo County Flood and Sea Level Rise Resiliency District Board, that's a mouthful, and report back to EQC, or I mean, I don't think that's a requirement, but it would be a way to stay on top of kind of the issues. I think this is going to become a big issue for the county and the city. So it probably is good for us to stay on top of what's happening there. I believe that Mayor Taylor, or sorry, Councilmember Taylor is attending those meetings and is going to probably, I would guess, hopefully serve on that board at some point. So we will have more city representation there, which is good. But I think it's always good for the EQC to stay engaged on that one. And then just potentially working with council members in the community, specifically in District 1, about, what are the options and what are the right solutions for the community there. Tracking the city's plans. There's a lot of development going on in District 1 right now. And I've had council members ask me, just questions about, should this development be happening? And if it's happening, what can we do to address the risks that are coming in the future? So I think there could be a role for EQC to stay more aware on top of all the different developments that are getting approved by City Council and weighing in where there is risk of future sea level rise affecting the development, weighing in with an opinion. Should the developers be setting aside money, for example, to pay for issues to infrastructure issues, roads and sewer lines or whatever that might be affected, and that they might look to the city to address, like if they're going to be approved to build in this area, like who bears the cost of that? So I do think that there's an issue for a subcommittee to form an opinion about that and advise council on that. And then other effects like wildfire, drought, heat waves, etc., could be something that the subcommittee looks at. And then the final one is outreach. So I think that's distinct from what the staff is going to hire consultants, I think, to do outreach for the policies that we're trying to pass, specifically for actions number 1 and 3 for buildings and for EV charging potentially. So there will be consultants who do that. So this would be different. What I was imagining was that the subcommittee could be thinking about, well, what's a public education? Like who in the city who lives in Menlo Park right now knows about the climate action plan? How, what materials might we be able to develop? At one point we talked as a commission about doing little neighborhood get-togethers when we were able to do that, but neighborhood get-togethers and gathering with people in our districts and just telling them about the climate action plan and what the goals are, and do we want to do that? So that's something the subcommittee could consider. What are the things that, without relying on staff time, what are the things that the commission might be able to do? Recognizing, in a normal situation, we might ask staff to do things in any of these, but right now they're just so strapped with doing the basics. So where can we help get the public more familiar with these things? Okay, so that's a lot of intro. Everyone feel like they kind of get the gist of it? Okay. I'm sorry I didn't get these to you with more time to consider, but maybe we can go through and we can either go through by person and you can express which things you're interested in, or we can go through by subcommittee and people can sort of raise their hands. Any preference? Janelle, you've probably done this before. What works better? Tom? No?
Not that much, but it's fine. I mean, I would just say, because we already have the list of subcommittees, maybe go through and get show of hands, and that way we can see if, you know, there's more people than there are, than can serve on it without causing a Brown Act problem. Anyway.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so let's go with the top one, building decarb. So I would be interested in being on that one. I'm guessing Tom would be.
Yes, I would be.
Anyone else? No, okay. That was easy.
Perfect.
Transportation decarb, raise your hand.
I'd be interested in that one.
James, Janelle. Okay. You guys probably know I want to be on all of them, and yet I have to restrain myself.
That's awesome.
Okay. Climate adaptation subcommittee. Show of hands. Leah. Woohoo. Okay. We can, so the one person who's not in the mix right now, of course, is Ryan and Deb.
Well, yeah.
Deb will be rolling off, but we'll have a new person coming on. But, you know, I am interested, like I said, I am interested in all of these. So Leah, you won't be alone, I think, in this. I think someone,
In fact,
what's that?
I thought that Ryan had mentioned something about being interested in that at the last meeting.
Okay,
But I might be wrong, but
let's put her down for that. In any case, someone will join you.
okay.
Okay, climate outreach subcommittee. Who's interested in that one? Janelle? Tom, great. And I would be interested in that one too. All right, and then trees and sustainable initiatives.
I'll sign up for that one.
Leah and James. James, okay. Great. That was super easy. All right, so here's what I've got. Building decarb, Tom and Josie, transportation, James and Janelle, climate adaptation, Leah and Ryan, climate outreach, Janelle and Tom and Josie, and trees and sustainable initiatives, Leah and James. Great. And I can ask, so I will take an action to ask Ryan for her okay, and Deb. Great.
Okay, and sorry, just to check, is that okay process, Ms. Lucky, or do we need to actually do it during a meeting?
Thank you, Commissioner London. You can create subcommittee. You know, I think you guys can, and ladies can weigh through whether the absent members that are not here, whether they might be interested in some of the other ones if they're full. So again, it's up to you and how confident and comfortable you feel assigning members, or, you know, polling them on maybe the other ones that they might have been interested in too. So anyway, that's just my feedback, but you can certainly take an action if you want.
I feel like I feel risky today. I'm okay with taking an action, and they can always let us know if that is, you know, not what they wanted. But I feel like, yeah, we did kind of hear some indications, and I don't think Deb's going to be too, you know, going to care too much since she's only covering 4 months worth. So anyway, I guess my leaning is to just go for it and see if it works out. And then if it doesn't, we can rediscuss on our next meeting.
I agree with that, and I see a number of the committees have only 2 members, and the Brown Act allows us space to put a third one there if
Yep.
people not attending are also interested in joining some of those currently 2-member subcommittees. So, I feel we should be bold and adopt the table of subcommittees.
Okay, so do we need like a motion and it's a formal vote?
Yes.
Okay, so I would move that we create the 5 subcommittees listed with the members that I read before, which is Building Decarb, Tom and Josie, Transportation Decarb, James and Janelle, Climate Adaptation, Leah and Ryan, Climate Outreach, Janelle, Tom and Josie, and Trees and Sustainable Initiatives, Leah and James.
If I can
Just a
offer
point of clarification for, so there are other standing subcommittees, and so I think for the next meeting, we would need to have an action item to either disband them or I don't know if that's the intent, but I just want to make sure that that is clear as well.
I think that would be the intent. So the one I'm aware of is the CAP subcommittee. So that would be disbanded and these would be formed. Are there other standing subcommittees?
I think there was a heritage tree subcommittee, but again, it doesn't need to be addressed now, but I just want to highlight that is an issue that the EQC will need to address to disband some if that's
Okay.
the desire.
That was the subcommittee of one that Ryan was. So,
Right.
Yeah, that would be so I'm expressing that would be my intent, would be to disband the existing subcommittees and constitute just these 5.
I was thinking we might be needing the climate action subcommittee to consider what new items might be added to the plan.
Shoot, you're right. Yep. Okay, well then the thing is that one kind of then overlaps with a bunch of these.
Yeah, but it is really important. And I know that subcommittee, which I was not a member of, did an amazing job of kind of outlining all the things that we wanted. And so, yeah, just kind of managing like which ones are next, how are we coming along? I do think that subcommittee needs to stick around at least for some time. Even if there's overlap, it's kind of the overarching guidance on the climate action plan is how I would see it.
Okay, so maybe that CAP subcommittee then, in order to not overlap with these other subcommittees, its focus would just be this action item we have on our plate, which is to go back to the list of 60 initiatives and decide what's the recommendation to council for next year, for next fiscal year. So it's not the council, that CAP subcommittee would no longer be delving into building decarbonization or some of the other things that we have been doing actually.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So under that model, I think we would be expecting the building decarb committee to be working on actions 1 and 3, plus considering that whether reach codes phase 2 or something like that
Yes.
comes before council. So it expand beyond just 1 through 6, but to look at all buildings issues.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, yeah, so maybe we clarify that. And then I guess we could disband the CAP subcommittee. I don't know, it's hard to think, it's like a just
No, I think you're right. I think, or Tom or whoever raised it, like, I think you're right. I think it needs to remain, but I think it just needs to have a narrow, that's what I think. It just needs to have a very narrow focus.
Yes, okay.
Right, and I think
Tom?
I think it's It does. I think it, under the original purpose of it, it just continues on that purpose because it was not meant to drive through and complete items 1 through 6. That subcommittee was to help determine what a plan would be, not to drive it to completion.
Right.
And so I think it can continue. But also, Commissioner Gaylord, I'd like to make a friendly amendment recommendation
Yes.
to the motion, and that would be to recognize there is space on the subcommittees to add members up to 3 per subcommittee for space for other members joining.
Great. Agreed.
And
Okay, there's
I'll just chime in and I talked to Commissioner Gellert earlier on this subject matter of the subcommittees, and so I think what would be helpful for staff, for me in particular, because we have a small limited sustainability staff, if there are a lot of subcommittees formed, the expectations of staff and how we prioritize who we respond to, because
Yes, thank you.
I can foresee, 5 different subcommittees asking me something and expecting a response, and that is just not going to be possible.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca, for bringing this up. And I'm sorry I didn't raise it because you're
Oh,
right.
no
We
worries.
talked about this. Yeah, so one of the things I think that as I was proposing this, the thought was, in normal times, non-COVID times, non-climate emergency times, I think staff is expected when an advisory body like ours wants to delve into something, is expected to sort of pivot and change their work to support what the commission wants to work on. Right now, staff is totally maxed out with what has been asked of them already, and so to the extent that we're creating these subcommittees, the intent is for us to really be the for lack of a better word, the worker bees, for us to really do the work and provide, to the extent that we can and we're interested, but to provide the helpful information to the EQC. So, if you were on the Transportation Decarb Subcommittee and, you had some information to share with EQC, you would get that on the agenda, present to EQC. We might take a motion and we might give a recommendation to council, but that we wouldn't be calling upon staff to do work above and beyond what they've already committed to support the climate action plan. Is that what other people are thinking, or?
Yeah, that's my understanding of the role of the subcommittee.
Okay, so I got a thumbs up from Janelle. Thumbs up from Tom. James?
I'm sorry, I got briefly distracted by my son going to bed, but were you just asking, is our understanding of the role of the subcommittee to be able to deliver regular reports to the rest of the EQC?
Yeah, just not to be providing, work, new work directives to staff. It's not, we're trying to not add more to their plate. We're trying to actually help and assist and add bandwidth so we can get more done with limited staff time.
And yes, I agree.
Okay, great.
So I just want to make sure the expectation too is that, so if staff hasn't been able to review the research material or policy options and it's being presented at an EQC meeting, there is that, please, do not take it personal, but, we may respond staff to kind of identify risk or gaps. And so that may cause then additional work then to return back to the EQC. So I just want to make sure I manage your expectations on, if you're not involving staff and you're doing research and work and bringing it to the EQC, the feedback from staff will be given likely at the EQC meeting and will sometimes require additional work.
I think that's fine. So and Leah, because you're new, so for the climate action plan, we met regularly, and Rebecca requested that we meet with her and update her every 2 weeks. And then before anything came to EQC, she reviewed it. And so that was, extra work for her. So what I said is, if we're going to have 5 subcommittees, then she can't attend all of them for sure. And she can't review everything that's going to come before the EQC necessarily before. So I said, I'm fine if the subcommittees develop a report or a presentation and it just comes to the meeting, and that staff, just like any member of the EQC, provides input at the meeting as opposed to beforehand.
Okay.
All right, great. So I think there's a motion, and I will let Janelle, but there's a motion on the table.
Let me ask, is there a second? And I will go ahead and second it.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Wait, who made the motion first? Sorry, I missed that part.
I made the motion.
Okay.
Tom made a friendly amendment that we could add up to 3 members to any subcommittee.
Or total, yeah.
Total.
And I believe, once again, I may have forgotten to ask for public comment on this item. So maybe I should back up and just ask.
This is part of the agenda item.
Good.
If you're
Okay.
creating subcommittees that are related to the climate, to the work plan, then that's fine.
Okay. Yay.
So basically the action is, for this agenda item, is that there's consensus that the work plan subcommittee is going to go back in and make some edits to the work plan to bring back at the next EQC meeting. And that now there is a motion to form subcommittees to carry out the work plan proposals. And I've already written down all the members that are included in that.
All in favor, raise your hand, and
I'm sorry, Commissioner Linden, I'll do a roll call.
Okay, perfect. Thank
Okay,
you.
but who seconded? That's what I want to know.
I did.
Okay, Linden, okay. All right, Commissioner Payne,
Aye.
Commissioner Elkins,
Aye.
Commissioner London,
Aye.
Commissioner Cabot,
Aye.
Commissioner Gillard.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Woo-hoo.
Hey, thank you again, Commissioner Gaylord, and all involved. That was a great effort. All right, I believe we're ready to move on to commissioner updates. Does anyone have any?
I have one.
All right, James.
So most of you might remember, about a year ago, we heard a presentation on 2 options for the landscaping for the Willow 101 interchange, where, as you might recall, a number of redwoods were cut down some years back. They finished the interchange. Now they're doing the landscaping. We, and then at a separate community meeting, both recommended option A, which I don't know how well people remember the differences, but it involved a small mini park between Willow Road and Willow Place, and more emphasis on a forest-like feel. About 2 weeks ago, the design company had a presentation to a state board to get a grant to fund it that I presented at. We don't know the results yet, I don't believe, unless I just haven't been updated, but whether or not they got the grant for it. But if they do, or if they have to go to some other source of funding, over the next year will be the second design phase. So while we approved the rough design for the park, there will be a chance for us to provide input again as far as specific species or small changes to the design. So anyway, or maybe Rebecca knows, but once we know something about the funding for that park and if it's going ahead, I'll let you know. But that's something that can be on our radar in the future.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing the presentation too.
Yeah, really. I can't believe how long that's taking. Like, we could have grown some redwood in the meantime, but okay.
I know, yeah, and I looked at the timeline for it, because then it's like next year design, the year after that approval, then the landscaping, then plant establishment, then like plants growing, I guess, from there on out. But so
Yeah.
it'll still be, unfortunately, a few years before plants are in the ground.
Yeah, it seems like it took 2 minutes to go ahead and cut the trees down, and now, yeah.
Well, trees don't grow by themselves.
Yeah. Okay, any other updates?
I have a couple. Tom and I have been working on action number 1, just supporting city staff and doing sort of delving into how much does it cost to fully electrify a building, and how might that be made cost effective for people if they're required to do it upon burnout of a gas device. And we're seeing some really promising results from the modeling that we're doing. And we're doing a lot of research, getting quotes from local contractors and learning a lot about that process. And so anyway, just wanted to report that that's really, that's going well. Tom also has developed something called the AMP diet, which maybe it's getting a new name, but it'd be nice, I think, to present to the commission, I think, about some of these things so that you all have a sense, and just, these are all things that the community is going to have to really learn more about. So to the extent that we're all sort of ambassadors, I think it would be great to have us all come up to speed. So maybe we can agendize that for a future meeting. A little bit on that topic related was we've gotten some pushback on a burnout ordinance, whether that's the right name for it. So we're tossing around other names. One would be a gas appliance phase out ordinance, a gas appliance retirement ordinance. Anyway, we can maybe just take it up at another meeting, but these are all things we'll have to decide on.
Wait, sorry, the pushback was just to the name of it?
Yeah, the name. I think one of the criticisms was you actually shouldn't wait until your water heater burns out to try to go electric, because you need to make some modifications frequently, like having some electrical work done to get a circuit run. So you don't want to wait till it burns out. You want to do a little prep beforehand.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes.
Yeah, I am happy to report that Peninsula Clean Energy has been picking up speed on a number of decarbonization efforts and getting interested in getting creative about how they go about it. And I've heard recently that they are interested in exploring developing a pilot project for something called Be Smart, which would involve planned water heater replacement near end of life. So water heater retirement and replacement with heat pump water heaters, and some combined with some financing. And then they are also interested in or about to expand their incentive levels for heat pump water heaters that will combine for, I think it's $2,500 total as the incentive for putting in a heat pump water heater, when their incentive is combined with the BayREN incentive. And that they are switching to 100% carbon-free energy in 2 weeks. So when the new year arrives, they will be 100% carbon-free on an annual basis. And then I thought I'd expand on that AMP diet tool that we've been developing. It's essentially a tool for helping people do electrification of the whole home, plus leftover capacity to charge electric vehicles and still fit on their existing electric panel. So just by some careful choices made, thinking ahead about the appliances that they pick. So picking more power efficient appliances or circuit controllers that flip between one and the other. That can help people avoid the expense of panel upsizing and help meet the workforce needs. As we start to look at how big the project will be to convert so many homes to all electric, it takes a lot of work. And so figuring out ways to get it done with fewer steps, like not upsizing the electric panel, will be a great benefit both to the homeowners and to the grid. Not expanding the size of the grid will help it. And then let's see. Well, that's all for my updates.
Thanks. I guess one thought I have is language around these things and how they're named can be really important. And AMP diet has the great benefit of being very few syllables. Depending on how you speak, it's 3 or 2. But I'll also say that if it were, and then burnout ordinance is nice and short as well. But I guess if there are ways to state those things very positively and clearly, like AMP diet is super wonky, I think. And if there was some other way to say, like, you know, hey, you don't have to upgrade anything with your panel, you can just spit it all in one. I guess AMP diet may well be the very best way to say that. But anyway, I just encourage, you know, exploration for terms that will not spark fear or misunderstanding, but like a general, like, hey, I like this, like the candy initiative, or I don't know.
Yeah, it could be a name like Panel Keeper. Because
Yeah.
then it says what the goal is.
Yeah, a panel keeper. Yeah, that sounds nice. Who doesn't want to keep their panels?
Oh,
Who knows they have a panel?
Who knows they even have a panel? Yeah. Anything else? Any other updates?
Oh, one other thing I wanted to raise for a future meeting is, you know, that we have a lot to do to address climate change, and we have members of the community who are interested, and we've talked about this, who are interested in helping out. And I was just wondering about ways to recognize those volunteers who have contributed their time and expertise. So if there might be a way for us to, you know, have a little proclamation or something periodically at a council meeting, or maybe it's just at our meetings. I don't know if that's ever been done in the past, but you know, I can imagine that being a way we can encourage people to engage on this important topic.
We did have something in our mission or our work plan about recognizing exemplary environmental leadership in the community, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. You know, if we want to take control of it and do it whenever we want and not have to bug city council, we should just do it in our meetings. And maybe invite the people who are going to be honored, you know, honor them right up front. I don't know if we have pre-printed certificates or something we can give them.
Maybe Miss Lucky, is that, well, I don't know, maybe we're not supposed to like discuss or ask for stuff input at this point, but maybe that's something, if that's ever been done, or if there's already a way to do that.
To provide certificates for, I'm sorry, I missed
Well,
the.
That's okay, to recognize volunteers who are helping out in different aspects of what we're doing on, specifically on climate, but is there a way for EQC to recognize community volunteers or people who've contributed?
Yeah, I think we could probably talk more about it offline. Yeah, I mean, the reports and announcements are really to give updates, but I think that's a good conversation to have.
Okay, we can agendize
There's
it.
been different ways that the EQCs, they've done environmental awards to businesses. So I'm just trying to jog my memory on how that process was. So I need to kind of look through
Okay.
and remember
Yeah, so
all that.
future agenda item, but it's something I would like to have a mechanism for.
Cool.
That's it for me.
Anything else? All right, hearing nothing, I don't think I have to move, but anyway, the meeting is adjourned.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
everybody.
Thank you all.
Have a great evening. Happy
Yeah.
You
holidays.
too.
Have
You
a
too.
happy holidays.
See you in the new year.
Oh my gosh.
Thanks. Have a good holiday.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
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 Bye.